Welcome to the city, Mastermind City. Hi, I'm Faye Chappell.
And I'm Stacey Maynard. Join us for a vibrant, inspiring, and uplifting master talk as we focus on how you can make a lasting impact on a global scale. Because the truth is, we're here because we want you to win.
So are you ready to surround yourself with success? Because you're in the right place. Welcome to the city. Today is Master It Storytelling. And so we picked that song because it's all about storytelling, and storytelling comes in lots of different forms, and it's really, really hot right now in business and brands.
Yeah. Well, no one has your story. So there's no competition when no one can talk the way you do, they can relate. And I think you've always said, well, position it differently and people get to know you. Well, when you position it with your story, people can relate to you better than maybe somebody else.
And they remember, right? And we all remember with stories. We are taught stories when we're young. We always remember those stories. You know, I can remember being in bed, and I remember my mom telling me the same stories over and over again. And now you look back and you're like, those are kind of silly, but you remembered them, right?
Exactly.
So, and I think people are always thinking, you're going to get on stage or you're going to get in front of a video or an audience and you're going to just, give the value add, etc. But really, it's not memorable unless somebody can equate something to it, right? Mm-hmm. There has to be, the characters and the transformation or the pivotal moment. There has to be some type of thing they walk away with and say, oh, I remember. Or just in brands in general, like consumer goods, anyone, Nike, Apple, they all tell stories when they're doing their their ads. And that's why you remember them, right?
Well, and you're drawn into how they're positioning it, and you want to be part of that. So Apple, we're very loyal.
Yeah.
Part of their story. We get it. We're involved. We know it, and we continue to buy.
Yep.
So good for them.
Exactly. So it's crucial that, I think that the biggest problem that most people face with it is, number one, they always say that, oh, my story's not that exciting. It's not compelling. It's just not worth it. I don't really want to talk about it. So the truth is, when we're in our story, we don't think it's that important because it's our story. It's just what we happen to be going through. Right. And then the minute we understand that it can make a significant impact on somebody else, then we start realizing how important it is to share. And I think the key is to understand is to write it all out or lay it all out for yourself, and then look back and say, what happened here? Like, what was my journey? What did I learn? Right? How did I get through it? It's, again, Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, kind of. You're the hero, sort of. What did I do to get through it? And what did I learn so that I can, use that for somebody? And people always equate it that it has to be, a personal tragedy. No, it doesn't. It can be about how you got through something in business, or how you escalated your business, or you moved forward somehow, you got out of the trenches and you were able to make it out. So it's not just about poor me and bad things that happen. Mm-hmm. It's about yay me and look what I did because I figured out the secret, right? I figured out the secret.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that people don't think, I hear this a lot, well, I don't have a story, because we talk about that a lot in business in general or going through, and they talk about how they can leverage that. And they're like, well, I don't have a story. Everybody has a story, like you said, even as minor as you think it is or not. And Teresa's just saying that a friend of hers always says to stand on your story, not in it. So what did you learn from it? And you taught me that, because I went, oh, it's boring. My story's boring. It's boring to me because I've lived it.
Yeah.
But you're like, well, what did you learn from it? I'm like, well, I learned a lot. We'll focus on that. Don't focus on the, oh, woe is me, tell it. But then what did you learn from it that somebody else could benefit from?
And the fascinating thing is, the more you tell, your story, the more you realize how it is impacted so many different parts of your life, right? Mm-hmm. And so you might be, if you're used to verbalizing it and telling it, you might be in the middle of workshop or a presentation, and then you'll remember a piece that will work perfectly with what you're trying to teach. That will, because you're trying to inspire or educate or make them understand and remember. And so the whole story is the piece that you want to get to so that they'll remember. So, I have lots of different little stories, and they come out, same things that happened in my life, but they come out at different times of when I'm speaking and what I'm speaking about. And I have to remember that each and every time I deliver it, there's people that have never heard it.
That's the key right there. And I think that's where I fluff over sometimes, because I'm like, oh my God, you guys have heard this before. And then the little piece that I tell, though, that's the part that somebody mentions at the end. Thank you so much for telling that. I understand you made an impact, you made a difference, because now they can go and, just leave with a different feeling, but they also get to know you. And I think that's the part that people forget, that I'm in this business, so I need to put on this business front. But actually, we do need to showcase who we are. And that's our differentiator. Our story is our differentiator, what we've gone through, how we've been able to come out the other end. And that was all what One Red Lipstick was all about.
Right. Exactly. So for those of you who don't know what One Red Lipstick is, that is Spencer's brand. She's the founder and creator. And it was about women, empowering women to stand up and tell their stories and share with others, so that other people could understand that they're not alone. And that, for every success out there, there were a lot of things in the background that you didn't know.
That was the interesting part, is that she literally came to you and said, we as sort of that younger generation saw you guys being successful, but look at all the stuff that you went through, and look at all this stuff that you learned from.
Yeah. And she was, she had the fortune to be able to sit there in the background and listen to us. So she actually listened to all the crap and the bad stuff. And then she also got to see us on stage being all great and, everything's rah. And then she's the one that actually came to us and said, that isn't really working for me, right? Like we need to understand the whole process so that we have some path to walk towards that can say, it's okay to have all this crap in your background. You can still make it, and you can still make it work. So it was great. You did the documentary and you did a book, and then also the speaking, the lives, which hopefully we'll be able
to go back to.
Well, when COVID is finally over and we can actually have proper live events. So, but it was key, and I think part of it is, she said to me, so to tell you guys the story. She had mentioned over lunch that she was thinking about doing a documentary about us, about, women entrepreneurs. And I said, that's cool. And, we talked about it, and I said, well, how much do you need? And she said, I don't know, $10,000. And I said, great, go do a Kickstarter, because I don't have it. So she did, and she did really well. But I asked her what she wanted to call it, and she said One Red Lipstick. And I didn't understand why. And she said, all those years that you were telling me, put on your lipstick and go meet the day and be ready for whatever life throws your way. She said, when my husband ended up in the hospital with his brainstem stroke, and I was there for, 5 weeks, didn't leave, sitting there in my chair. And she said, she used to walk in, and I was there with my ponytail, my yoga pants, and my lipstick. And then she said, that was when she got it. That's when she understood what I meant by put on your lipstick, meaning, you're ready to face the day. So telling you that story, you'll understand now, and you'll remember what it's about. And so again, if I didn't have, which is a true story, but if I didn't have that story, then it wouldn't be as impactful for you to remember why she named it that. The key to remember...
And I think what I like about that story the most is the fact that you didn't know until much later that had an impact on her.
No, years and years. It's like, I always say, you never know all the stuff that you tell your kids. You don't know if they'll ever listen, right? So then she was, 21 years old, and all of a sudden she was understanding everything I told her when she was 13, 14. So your impact is huge. And, the key and what I want to make sure that you understand from that is stories need to be true if you're going to tell them, or you won't remember them.
Please make them true.
So if you see somebody on a stage or a video and the story changes, it's because it's not true, because they don't remember it, right? Because that's the cool thing about telling real stories. Unless you're a really great actor or you have a fantastic memory, you can't remember lies very well.
So, when you start to go when you start to think, I don't remember, or hang on a second, and I'll be completely transparent. The first time that I spoke live about my story, I had notes. I didn't have notes because I didn't know my story. I had notes because it was the first time I was telling it, and I felt that my emotions were going to get in the way, and I was very nervous. So I just needed to, the quick jot of what part of the story should I talk about next, kind of thing. But it's interesting when you go, hang on a second, I can't really remember that particular, hang on, I have this written down. That's not your story. It's not authentic then, because there's no emotion, there's no relatability, there's no authenticity around that.
So the key really, it has to be yours, right? So if you're not really sure, I would get, again, what we always talk about is record yourself. So record yourself telling your story and then tell it a couple of times over and over again. And then sit back and try to understand the themes of your story and what you got out of it. And make some sense of it. Because here's the thing, when you guys are doing courses or you guys are doing coaching, what you'll do is there's a point in every training or coaching that you say, you come to the point where you say, I know what I'm doing because of the way I transformed through this journey. So because I was in your space and didn't have the answers, and then I tried everything, and then I finally put together a framework that worked for me. And now that's what I teach. So that's really what your story in terms of business is about. It's about sharing what you did and what you learned, and that using that framework of what you learned to be cornerstone to what you do, whether it's, again, courses, coaching, whatever you're doing. It always comes back to you developed a blueprint, framework, roadmap, whatever you want to call it, because that's what came out of it.
And I think the biggest takeaway that I want to emphasize is just understanding that other people can benefit from your story, and don't play it down. Don't play down what you've done, but more focus on the success of it and what you've been able to come through. And I know a lot of the people that are on here have amazing stories. And I know I'm at fault of this too. I'm not one to splash my story kind of all over the place, but I own it. And when I do speak, I always reference it in different areas and take a snippet here, because that makes sense to the people in the room. But just putting it out there. I know you said to record it. Don't look back on that recording and go, oh my goodness, I should never tell the story because it was horrible. So it's genuine. It's yours. Own it. Be proud of it. You are the way that you are because of your story, and any way that you can kind of intermix that into your speaking, into your marketing. People just want to get to know you. So you are you, and all the things that happen to you, no matter how big or small. So don't count them because you think they're just minor.
So the key, and the reason I tell you guys to record and understand, is because it's like when we're learning how to, put together a program or a speech, you need to make sure it's impactful. So I'm not saying that your story isn't impactful. It is. The challenge when you're first saying it is that it's running. Your mouth is running because the first time you said it, and there's no cohesiveness to it. So as you step back, that's why I said analyze your framework. What are your 3 key learning points? What are your key things what's your message out of your story that will make a difference to somebody in the audience, or somebody on a video, or somebody on a coaching call? What comes out of that? And that's why when you start honing it in It's the exact same framework we teach when I'm teaching a speakeasy formula. It's about, whenever you're doing a speech, if you're doing a story, same thing. You want to key in on those 3 points, 2 points, whatever you're working on, but you want to key in on them and make them as impactful as possible by understanding to take out all the baggage that's around it. Because sometimes you just run, right? Your mouth runs.
Yeah, they get lost in the story almost.
They do. And
then they go down. It's like, back up.
We've done a lot of One Red Lives, and we've seen people that were bang on, right? And then we see people that good for them that they got their story out, but there wasn't a nice linear path. And generally speaking, in a story, you've got the character, who's generally you. Right? You have the character faces a problem or a circumstance or a challenge. Then, they hit a block or an obstacle or, a foe, and then they figure out, they come up with a solution and they figure it out and they understand it and they win at the end their challenge, or they, come across with learning. So it's that's a simplified Joseph Campbell thing. So if you really like heroes' journeys and stuff like that, you can look up his book. He's very famous. But anyways, it's just about understanding how your story can impact. So, and it's hard, right? It's hard to, even to this day, I still have people going, when I tell them what I do, and they're like, oh, I could never do that. And how do you do it? And I'm like, I don't know.
I don't know. Exactly. And Anthea's just piping in just as the classic hero's journey. We are all heroes in our own story.
Absolutely. And it's not a superhero thing, guys. It's not like you had to have come through this big, huge obstacle, right? Like, it can be a minor one, but it's one that is not minor in your world and one that everyone out there faces. So it could, for some people, it could be, how all your friends, I'm just going to put a general one, all your friends got married at, before they were 30. And you didn't. And you had to figure out how to be okay with, going through the process of being able to tell people that, you didn't want to get married or it didn't happen or you're not ready. You didn't ever want to have kids. But again, it seems like not a big deal, but it was a big deal in your life, right?
Exactly.
Getting through a divorce, losing a business, losing all your money, personal tragedies come in all shapes and sizes, right?
But do you find, I know when I speak or I do a presentation or whatever, and I just kind of interject little things, again, those are the stories or those are the pieces that people want to talk about afterwards. Oh, I had that happen to me as well. Oh, I can definitely relate to what you said. Oh, I really understand. And when someone can relate to you, understand what you've been through and feel like they've had sort of that, peephole into your life and they understand, the trust factor goes up huge. And they're like, okay, you know what? I want to work with you because you get me. I get you. I've been there. We've both, just that whole relatable thing. And it makes you human.
Right.
A lot of times it's like you didn't wake up one day, you're on stage, you're teaching, you're doing a presentation, you didn't wake up one day and, you're able to speak to 1,000 people or multiple of thousands of people on stage. It doesn't work like that.
No.
I find it fascinating when I've done, multiple LinkedIn profiles for people and they talk about this much and they're like, well, yeah. I said, well, did you wake up one day and decide that you're going to do this? And I'm like, well, no, this is how I led to it. Tell people that.
That's the interesting part, right? So, I always teach people to find a mentor, and I just mean it doesn't have to be, you don't have to pay them. Find somebody that you aspire to be like and learn about their story, right? Learn about how they got there, and their story will teach you so much because generally speaking, it's through a lot of challenges, a lot of hard work, a lot of dedication, but that's how you start learning about how to make something of yourself and how to get there, right? So I think sometimes, we look at, it's a good example is, I always talk about now, Jack, my son, who's on YouTube, he's doing really, really well. And he's got like 400,000 subscribers and it's very, beneficial for him. So everything's working well and people go, oh, well, he got lucky. No, he didn't. He's been doing videos for 6 years. He's got 400 over, I think his catalog's about 800 videos. And if you know how long it takes to do those, the at that quality, you'll understand it's not an overnight thing, and he's not lucky. It means all the hard work. You just happen to notice him now.
Right. It's not, and that's the thing you have to look at. And yes, of course, do you want to fast track? Learn from him.
Yeah.
But it took time, it took investment, it took sleepless nights, it took years.
It took 4 or 5 business ideas that failed. Right.
Yeah,
and so
look at all the guys that are really, look at Gary Vee as a perfect example. He's like, I used to do daily videos. Nobody was watching, but he just kept going. For years, nobody watched him, but he just kept going. Those are the years that you don't see, because you see him now, and it's like, it didn't happen overnight.
No, it didn't. So that's why, sometimes if you don't actually see someone sharing their story, just dig in, because you'll find it somewhere. But if you can actually share it, most people that are successful will tell you everything there is to know. The reason we're up here sharing is because we want you to succeed. We're not trying to hide some secrets, because we're not afraid. There's lots of room for everybody. So when we tell you Tech Tuesdays, all the tech we use is because we use it and it works, right?
Exactly.
It's, in terms of storytelling, we do storytelling. We use storytelling. You'll see it flow through some of our feeds this week. You guys, we've told you over and over again, we have themes, right? To make life easier for both us and Spencer, who does our social media.
For her. So keeps us on track as well.
So this week is about storytelling. So you will see stories weaving through our entire week of social media posts, right? So we're trying to encourage everyone to understand how impactful that can be. So when we do a quote, that quote is going to lead somehow back to storytelling and with us, right?
Exactly. So I think the other interesting thing, that big learning for me when I started to tell my story, was in the beginning, it was an extremely emotional thing to start to talk about it. I remember, the first couple of things, I have a couple of different stories, and tears literally, or I get choked up, because it is difficult to start talking about that, because, depending on what your story is, start to tell those stories. But the more you tell them, and it doesn't make it any less emotional. It's easier to tell.
Right.
The more you tell them it, the easier it becomes to tell them, and the easier it comes out. And yeah, you still, you do that pause, because it's extremely impactful. Mm-hmm. But it's no longer I'm going to start to cry because of it, or I'm starting to get choked up. I can actually start to talk about it in a more meaningful way. And that just helps the flow of the conversation. And so the more you tell it, the easier it becomes, basically.
And the more you tell it in with regards to a framework. So what I mean when I always say that, it's real simple. If you have 3 key points you want to make, right? 3 key points that you want to understand, that people need to understand. If you're trying to stay on track with those 3 key points, it's easier to get through the tears, because your points, where you're going. Right. So if you start choking up, it's it's okay. I need to go to the next point. Right. In your brain, it's leading you down the path, because it doesn't, I can still remember the first couple times hard. And as you tell it, you start opening up and telling a little more. Right. Yes. As you go, you don't do it at first. And I still remember the first time I said something that nobody had ever heard. And I'd already been talking for 2 years about my story. And I never wanted to open up on something. And I thought, for some reason in that moment, it felt right. And I said it. And I was afterwards, I was oh, okay, well, that's fine. Now I can say it all the time. So it just becomes freeing, because you've done it. So remember, I want you to be careful on this, okay? You're not telling your story just to tell your story and make yourself feel good.
No.
You're telling your story to add value and impact on a global scale, right? So when I say impact on a global scale, what I'm referring to is, let's say you're here on a video and you're talking to people from all around the world. You don't know them. There might be, there might be 10 people, there might be a million people. You don't know. But just think about it this way. If you can impact somebody because you are smart enough to sit here and understand what are those 3 lessons people can gain, doesn't have to be 3. I just always talk in 3s. Whatever that impact can be gained, and somebody in Japan can get it and somebody in Italy can get it, then that's what I mean. The difference is, if you think about that and you can say to yourself, okay, how can I impact that person in Japan, rather than just tell my story to say, oh, woe is me, this is how I got through it.
Yeah, well, it doesn't have the same value, because you do have to still make it relatable to the people that you're talking to. Not just, okay, so today I'm going to tell you all the things that I've been through.
Exactly.
No, and then I'm going to go, so, like, good for you, but how can I use that information? How can I maybe fast track some stuff? I want to focus on the learning. I want to learn from others. And if there's no learning, then there's no point to it. Exactly. There needs to be a point to the story.
Yeah. So does anyone have any questions on story? Like, or is there something that you're like, you're struggling with? This is a great time to ask us. Are you struggling with something? You don't know how to actually put it out there. You're afraid of maybe, part of it is being afraid of putting it out on social media, for example, because you're going to get some trolls, which we talk about a lot. You're going to get some trolls that say, oh, stop crying, or get over yourself, or, I've had a lot worse in my life. You'll get a lot of people like that.
People, yeah. So Anthony wants to know, how does your story serve others?
So again, depending on what you've accomplished, what you've come through, and being able to show them where you are because of it. So if something happened to you that, you lost a business, I don't know your story. So sorry, you can pipe in, but if you lost your business, or you lost all your money and you had to start from scratch and you had to develop a system to get there, and then you came up with this framework and it worked, or you came up with these step-by-step approach and it worked, and now you're using that to help others. So when people understand that, you were there, you were walked in their shoes, you had to get through it, that's what's going to make them feel like, oh, okay, I can relate to this person. So even if it's not exactly related to your business, they relate to the fact that you are a hard worker, you got through it, you managed to get through the struggles and be successful, and therefore they trust that they working with you will be a huge benefit.
I think the biggest thing that you said that relates to me is that you walked in their shoes.
Yeah.
And that's what people want to understand, that, again, you didn't just wake up one day and decide to do this. You didn't just wake up one day and you were a successful person, because people can't relate to that.
No.
They're like, okay, well, blah, good for you. But no, actually, you've been there, you've done that. And especially when you've had to start over, maybe you've had some financial challenges, literally, paying one credit card with another credit card. That's the example you've used in the past as well. And they're like, okay, now this is the person I want to work with, because they understand what it's like to be there.
Well, in that example, I remember I was talking, there was 1,000 people I was talking to. And I remember saying on the stage, and I was telling about, how I ended up with 0. I had to start all over again. And I asked them how many people in the audience, these are all business people, have failed at their business, and no one put their hand up. And then I said, oh, come on, how many people have had to decide which credit card to make a payment on, and which one were they going to be, okay, I'll have to get the phone call from the bank. And then I looked around, and then all of a sudden, like, a couple of hands shot up, and then a couple more, right? Because I was open enough to say that was me. Like, I had to go through that. I had to take those calls. I had to have a very bad credit rating for a long time because of circumstances with, my husband and going through our savings, because that's what happens when tragic medical things come your way. So, but I didn't want it's not any good if everyone in the audience is going, "Oh no, I've been fine." No, you haven't. You haven't. Everybody's had things that have failed, and if you haven't had things that haven't failed, good for you. But I don't think, this is the truth, I don't think I want to learn from you. Because if only thing you've ever been is successful, you've never walked in my shoes.
And you can't relate.
You don't know what it's like to not have that that feeling
Struggle.
that I can't make the money this month. I don't know how I'm going to pay for my kid to go here. I don't know what I'm going to choose to do next. What are my options? So the truth is, the more you can get real and, don't really think about this. The stuff that's a little embarrassing. It's embarrassing to admit that you can't pay your Visa bill, right? It's only embarrassing the first time. It's only embarrassing the first time you say it out loud, right? After that, it's okay, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, people start saying to you, "Oh yeah, I couldn't either. I was exactly the same," right?
Exactly. So Anthea's just expanding on what she said. She said she's a total staff turnover within a few weeks. She tells the story in relation to how having our vision kept moving us forward as a couple in business, and now she can help couples in business do the same. So she understands. So she's walked in the shoes of that, which is really good.
So I guess
Colin's asking. Go ahead.
Well, the only thing I want to say to Anthea is, I think, Anthea, I don't know, do you use your story when you're talking to prospective people? That's what you have to really start integrating. It's a little bit of an art. That's why I said you have to understand it. But if you're not using your story, this is what I say to everyone who comes to me: shame on you. Because if it could benefit somebody, I think we don't have a lot in this life that we can, change for people, but by sharing stories, we can make a difference. So for those of you who are holding back because you're embarrassed or you don't think your story's impactful or whatever, shame on you. That's it. Calling you out. Go ahead, Colin.
Colin's asking, if you're putting it out as a video, how long should it be? Is it just the length of the story, or should it be smaller examples? What does that look like? But that's that's a big question.
Yeah, it's a big question. Again, putting it out in what context? What is your aim for your story that you're putting out there? Again, is it so you can just get people to know you, or are you interweaving it into some type of bigger dialogue so people can understand how your story has got you to this point and how you can use it to teach others? Like it's got to be context around it. So your story could be an entire day that is interwoven in your training, in your workshop, and it could be a 3-minute video with the key points, right? Depends on how you want to use it.
Depends on how you're using it. That's a big question. Again, and like we said before, it's not just for the whole point of just telling your story.
No.
Like, good for you have a story, but there needs to be a point to it, and what's the learning that other people are going to get.
Yeah.
And he's also just pointing out that having to admit a business failure is the number one fear for all entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
So I think that's the biggest challenge to people is, well, I don't want to tell people that I had a hard time paying off my credit card.
Well, I like to tell them all the time.
Yeah, exactly. But that's a mind shift that you need to make.
Yeah. The truth is, I can't say this enough. Tell people all the times you failed, because they will love you. Because the truth is, then you can tell them the learning you did, because you could not have done well until you failed. That's my theory. You don't understand what you need to change, right? You don't understand what you need to change. I was just watching somebody last week who launched this successful product and has done really, really well in the last couple of months. And she said, this other one that I remember her launching 2 years ago, totally tanked, didn't sell anything, thought she was done. And then 2 years later, she launched something else that totally was on track, on point, and now she's doing really, really well. But the truth is, she told everyone, I tell people all the time what didn't work, all the time.
I
'Cause
tell
don't
people,
want you guys- yeah.
well, I had, when I do my podcast workshops, I tell people that my first podcast was a huge failure.
Yeah.
And and now I learn, but look at what I learned. You learn more from failure than you do from success. If I had just launched a podcast and it did well, I'd be like, well, that was easy. And I wouldn't have felt like I had learned very much. I just did it. But the first one was it was a huge failure, but I learned so much from it. And I felt now I want to help others not do what I did, learn from my mistakes. So you don't have to make the same ones.
Right. It's kind of like if you guys are looking for, if somebody's looking for a life coach, sorry, I'm going to call some people out, but if somebody's looking for a life coach, I don't want their life coach to be 18, right? 20.
Haven't experienced anything.
And you see these which is great. Maybe a 20-year-old can help a 16-year-old, or unless a very few and far between have lived a very, full life by the time they're 20. But I see a lot of life coaches out there that are so young. They haven't experienced anything. I'm not interested. What could they possibly tell me other than what they've learned in a book, right? I want somebody with some experience, if that's what I'm looking for. Now, preface that, if I want to learn how to make a TikTok, I'm going for the younger crowd, right? Because they know more than somebody who's, spent a lot of time doing other things.
Absolutely. Very true. I go to my 16-year-old for TikTok advice. My 14-year-old, same thing. I'm like, how do I do this on TikTok?
Right.
I'm not going to ask the older crew that's focused on Facebook. Depends on what you want to know. But I agree with you 100%. In order, I would want to have an experience. I want to talk to somebody who's a life coach that's been there, done that. I can relate to them, that have failed. They've learned from their failures, and they can help me through it because I can relate to them rather than, and they've walked in my shoes.
So think about, if say you're looking for, a relationship, a soulmate, whatever you want to call it. So if you're let's say you're in your 50s and you're looking for that, and you have two people to choose from, and they both look fairly successful, right? One has shared the story of her struggle and how many people she dated and the challenges with the relationships. And then finally, she finally found somebody late into her 40s or 50s, whatever. And the other one, same age, but she's been married since she was 20.
Right.
And she teaches. So who are you going to relate to? The one that's had a perfect relationship since she was 20 and bless her,
that's
good
great.
for her.
Love the fact that her marriage has been perfect. Good for her.
Absolutely. But she doesn't understand what it's like to have to struggle through that. So if you're that person, then that's what people want to hear. They want to understand. They want to see somebody that says, I was there. I was exactly like you. I understand. Yeah. And if she can get through this, the person that's teaching me this, if she can get through it, then I can too, because it's true. There is no real special people out there, guys. You guys are all special. Everybody is. So don't think that they somehow, got lucky or somehow something happened, generally speaking, that made them get through their journey. Thanks for joining us in the city for this episode of Master Talk.
If you're ready to make a lasting impression on a global scale, you can learn more at joingia.com. That's JOINGIA.com.
So go there now because the world is waiting for you.